start the recording. Let's get this show on the road. So I'll share my screen to start with. Just go with that. Let's pick this one. Cool. So today we're going over arrays. So we're going to go over 1D arrays and 2D arrays. This is just like a general what we're going over. Nothing too like concrete to stick to. So if you've got any questions about anything specific, quite happy to go over that as well. Just let me know. But to start off with, to make sure everyone's awake, I'm going to start with a Kahoot. Here we go. I don't know if you can hear any music, and if you can't hear any music, I don't really know how to change that. I do apologize. So yeah, feel free to join the Kahoot. I'll give you guys like a minute. You can hear? Cool. So it's just stuff on 1D arrays, I'm pretty sure. I don't think I did stuff for 2D arrays. Yeah, that's right though. Volume up. Does that increase the volume of it? Cool. Another like 20 seconds to join, and then I'll get started. I'm pretty sure the game pin still stays at the top. But if not, I'll just copy and paste it into the chat for anyone that joins a bit late. All right, let's go. Correct. So yeah, an array is a collection of elements that all have the same data types. That's like integers, characters, doubles, an array of arrays, but those arrays inside your arrays would have to be of the same type, which is what 2D arrays are. Yeah, all the rest of them, not quite correct. Yeah, good job. So yeah, just a collection of elements with the same data type, which is just how you initialize it at the start. All right, next question. Kind of already gave this one away. Yeah, so all of the below, as I put it. So yeah, you can have character arrays, you can have int arrays, and you can have double arrays, or at least that's what we've covered in the course. So a character array is also called a string. I'm just going over integer arrays for this revision section. Tom's doing strings and stuff like that. If that's what people are specifically looking for, I feel like I should preface that at the start. But yeah, you can have all these different types, and as long as you put things that are of this type inside your array, you should be all right. So they're not identical. They're different because they're different types. Not that you mix them up. Int array has a null terminator. Not quite. So the character array has a null terminator. So this is like when you do strings, and at the end of your string, you've got like the \0, sorry. So that's what the null terminator is. And what that means is that you can work out what the length of a character array is without like knowing the length at the start. You can basically iterate through, find where the null terminator is, and once you reach that null terminator, you're like, oh, this is where it ends, regardless of if you've got more spaces afterwards. Whereas an integer array, there's no defining character that tells you where the end of an array is, other than like a compiling error because you've gone off the index. So when you're doing stuff with int arrays, you've got to make sure that you know what the length is. Otherwise, you might get a bit of an issue. But yeah, character arrays have a null terminator. Int arrays and double arrays don't. There are multiple correct answers for this one. Cool, so now we got the wrong one. So yeah, this one you haven't defined what this is, and it's also just not correct in general. So yeah, you can do something like this, where you're saying that it's an integer array, and this is the name, which is a bad name. Don't do that, make sure you're descriptive with it. And then the length, which is 5, and then doing this just sets the first element to 0. But that's fine, because when you create it anyway, it sets everything to 0, or at least it should, depending on what you're using. This also works. This just doesn't tell you what's inside, like you're not declaring, you're not saying that what any of the elements are. You're just saying that I need 5 spaces in an array, and it's going to be called X, and telling them that it's an integer array. And then this one also works. So you're saying it's an integer array, it's going to have 5 spaces, and then you're telling it what's going to be in each of the 5 spaces. So yeah, if you're going to tell it what's in the 5 spaces, or however many spaces you have, if you're manually doing it, make sure you use these curly brackets, and then separate all of your numbers or your doubles with commas. And don't forget your semicolons. Yeah, good job. By size, it means what's the length. Yeah, so for 2 would be the highest index, because if you've got 3 elements, it means that you've got your indexes would be 0, then 1, then 2. But in terms of the size of the array and how much space there is, we haven't told it how much there is at the start, which is a little bit obscure. I probably should have pointed that out. But yeah, so you're telling it that it's an integer array. I'm calling it values, and I'm not actually sure how big it's going to be. So you're telling it how big it's going to be by assigning what's inside of it. So you're saying it's going to actually have 3 spaces, and this is what's going to be in it, and that is the length of the array. Cool. Yeah, also, if you have any questions about any of the questions, feel free to post them in the chat. Yep. So I probably should have put it inside there, but what that means is that an array with 1,000 spaces in it, so it'll be like int array values and then square brackets, and you'd have 1,000 inside that. If that's declared, then the largest index that you can have is 1 minus the length. And if the length is 1,000, 1 minus that is 999. Cool. There are multiple different ways to print out all the elements in an array, but there's one that's kind of objectively better. So yeah, looping through it. So you can use, you can't, for the scope of this course, you can't really just printf the array. You can use lots of print statements, but if you've got an array that's anything longer than like, I'd say 3, any more than like 3 things in it, you should probably loop through it rather than using sets of print statements, because it just gets really messy and so much better to loop through it, and then it doesn't matter how long it is because you can just set up variables to cap it where you need to cap it, which is good. And that was just also correct because I think it's fun. I don't know if that's big enough. Yeah, my bad. I didn't realize how small that picture was going to be. Can I zoom in on it? Yeah. Yeah, that looks better. So basically, oh, oops, my bad. Okay, there we go. So basically, it's an integer array called lights, and it has 4 spaces, and I've told it what's inside of it. And then I'm setting the first index to be equal to 18, and then the second index is going to be equal to whatever's in the first index. So that means that this would be 18, and then lights 2 would be equal to lights 1. So that would be 18, 2, 2, and then 4. And if you sum them up, you get 26. Did anyone have any questions about this? I'm sorry that was so small, and I probably should have given you more time for that question. I'm gonna take silence as a positive. Yeah, I couldn't do the math quick enough. Yeah, I probably should have made it a little bit easier. It was a little bit mean of me. Just keeping you all on your toes. And then just for fun. Cool. Yeah, this one's putting a table back, so not technically a table flip, but everything else was fine. Yeah, that's the Kahoot. Cool. Good job, guys. Cool. So yeah, that was the Kahoot. If you've got any questions about any of that, do let me know. Or if anything on the screen isn't big enough, also let me know that as well, because I've got it on a monitor, so it all looks bigger to me than it does on a screen. But yeah, that's all good. So yeah, we've kind of covered these. I might zoom in on these a little bit just so you know what I'm talking about. So what is an array? Which was one of the Kahoot questions, and it's just a collection of elements that are of the same type. So like integer, character, double. Yeah, what types can you have? Integer, character, double. And then initializing an array, you know that you need to tell it what type it's going to be. You have to give it a name, and you also need to give it a size. And then optionally, you can tell it what's going to be in it when you initialize it. But you don't necessarily have to. Oops. So I'm going to go through some coding examples just to sort of jog everyone's memory a little bit, and we'll make some functions as well, just for fun. All right, let me pull up my other document. Cool. So let's say I want to create an array to store just values. We'll go int, and we'll set it. We'll have to find a size actually, and we can change that quickly when we need to. Go something like that. And let's say I want to set all of the values to be equal to 3, or I want to set things to be in ascending order. So I'd make a while loop just to set everything to 0. Oops. But you want to have something to iterate through or to count. So something that is generally quite accepted in coding to be used as an iterator is just I, or you can do j if you want. Really up to you. Usually you use I and j if you're going through a 2D array. But if we're just doing a 1D array and we want to loop through it, you can use I, or you can use something like counter or iterator, something like that. So maybe I'll make a comment so we know what we're doing. We can set the value equal to its index. So while I is less than, what's it going to be less than? Is it less than size? Is it less than size plus 1? Like what's this going to be less than? What's this condition going to be? Any ideas? Going to be less than the size. So what that means is that I can go from 0 up until 10 minus 1, which is 9, which happens to be the largest index that we can have, because with arrays you start at 0 and you stop at 1 minus the size. And in this case we've said that the size is 10, and just because we've hash defined it, it's a lot easier to just do that. So if we go through and then we want to assign values. So to assign values to something, you want to call the array, which we've called values, tell it which index you're looking at, and we're looking at whatever index we're going through, starting at 0 and going all the way up to 9. And then we want to set that to be equal to its index, which at the moment is just going to be I, something like that. And for a while loop, you've got to remember to iterate. So you can do something like that, or you can do like I equals I plus, whoops, I plus 1. And then to check that works, we can print out the values. Out all the values in a 2D array. Cool. So if we want to do that, like we said in the Kahoot, the best way is to loop through it. So we're going to do something similar to this. So I'm just going to steal it straight from where it is. I'm just going to take away that. And instead of doing that, I'm going to print out all the values. And because it's an integer array, if you want to print out the values, you do it how you would print out an integer. So you do %d, and then I'm just going to do a space. So they're all a little bit spread out. And then you tell it what you want to print from, or what you're drawing it from. And that would be values, whatever the index is. It's just going to be I. And then just print out a new line to make it look nice. All right, let's see if this runs. Cool. So yeah, I'm just using an online thing so that I don't have to compile each time. But if you wanted to do it, you'd save your file and then compile and all the rest of that, like DCC rather than GCC. DCC, yeah, you know the drill. Yeah, so for this example, we've set all the indexes equal to their values, and then we've just printed all of them out, which we can see over here in the terminal. Anyone have any questions about that? I'll take silence as a positive. Feel free to just post anything in the chat. So yeah, just printing out an array, pretty straightforward, nothing exciting. All right, let's look at what we're going to do next. So we've gone over these, what an array is, initializing an array, printing elements in an array, difference between a character and an int array. That was just that a character array has a null terminator, which is just that, the backslash 0 thing. That's all the differences, doesn't really matter. So we're going to create some functions. Create a function to sum all the elements in an array. So we want it to return the sum. So let's say int, because if we're returning a sum, then it means that we want to return a value, and this value is going to be of a type integer. So let's call it array sum. So what sort of things do we want to pass into here? Anyone have any ideas of what needs to go in other than the array? Anything else that we need to pass in? Yep, we already have size, you're right. But or do we? So yeah, I might make it like a generic example where we don't actually know the size. And then yeah, you do need to pass in the size. So you could go like int size. Maybe I'll go int length just for ease. So yeah, I should probably cool. So anyone have any ideas of the first thing that we should do? Or any ideas of what we should do in general if we're going to sum up all the elements in an array? Loop through the array. Yeah, so we'll do a similar thing that we've done up here. I'll just write it out again just to reinforce it. So we set up our counter. I might, I'll call it index actually. I'll change it up. So you say index to be 0 because if an array starts at 0, that's where you want to start at. And then we have a while loop. And inside your while loop, you want your condition. And that's basically as long as the index is less than the length, because either you know if something is of a length, it has to be the highest index is the length minus 1. And then what do I want to do here? So I'm calling values index. And then what I want to do with that value, now that I have it, so I've looped through, I can get each value from each index, but what do I want to do? What am I missing? A sum variable, absolutely. So we know that a sum, and we know because it's an integer array that the sum is going to be integers. If we had like doubles or if we were doing like dividing or something like that, then it'd be a little bit iffy, but we're just using integers, so we can just say like int sum, which is fine. We'll set that to 0 because most sums, all sums actually, should start at 0. So we get our value and we want to add that to the sum. So we can go sum equals sum plus values index. And then remember to iterate your counter, so index equals index plus 1. And because it's a function that has a return value, and that return value is of type int, just remember to put in a return function or a return statement. Cool. So does that look good? Are we missing anything? Is this going to run if I set it up? Anything missing, just like in general? To declare the function. Absolutely right. So remember to chuck a prototype at the top of your code. Prototype everything before this curly bracket. And you just want to make sure that that's above your main. Otherwise, your main has no idea what you're talking about. Prototype. Cool. And then if we call this and we pass in the array, which is values. Yeah, there we go. Values. And then the size is just size. And then we can print out the sum, hopefully. And let's print a new line. Cool. Let's run this and see what happens. Cool. So it's gone through, we've created our array of values, set everything to its index, printed it all out just for fun, and then summed it. Just going through and doing all of that, which looks pretty good to me. Any questions about that? I'm also just going to move the printing of that into a function. Let's go print array. Can't tell if that's all indexed. That's fine. Doesn't really matter. Just a prototype, just to clean it all up a little bit. Cool. And then we'll go print array, and we'll go values. I should also pass in the length. Yeah, if you were doing this as a character array, you wouldn't need to pass in the length because you already know what that's going to be. Because of, well, you don't need to pass it in because you can work it out because you have a null terminator. But for this, we don't have a null terminator. So let's go this and then size and update it here. Oh, doesn't like that. That would do it. Yeah, remember if you're moving blocks of code into functions, make sure you've initialized everything, but usually your compiler will tell you and just work from the first error down, and then it should all clear up. So yeah, that's that. Any questions about that? Or moving stuff into a function or anything like that? Cool. Let's look at the next question. So creating a function that searches for the first instance of a number in an array and returns its index or -1 if not found. Just going to copy that in. Cool. So let's do that. So we can call it, so if it's going to return something, well, I guess let's go through it. So function that searches for the first instance of a number in an array and returns its index or 1 if not found. So first thing to note is that it returns something and it returns its index. So its index is going to be an integer. So we can call it int, like find index. And then what are the sorts of things that we want to pass in? So we know that we need to pass in the array. So we'll just keep with the theme of this and we'll just pass in int values. We also know that we need to pass in the size or the length because we just don't know where it ends. And if we're looking for a specific number, then we probably want to pass in like, I don't know what's a good name for that. We can call it like instance. But like, yeah, we'll go searching. Not the best name for it, but I can't think of a better one at the moment. So we have our array, the length, and the number that we are looking for. So if you want to search through an array, we know that the best way to do that is to use a while loop. So we should probably set up a counter. So in this case, we can call it index. 0. And then we can have a while loop. So well, index is less than the length. And then we want to see if any of the values are the same as the number that we're searching for. So we might go if we use the array value first. So values index. So for every index that we go through, if that number is equal to the number that we're searching for, remember to use double equals when you're saying are they equal rather than assigning. We're saying if the value that we find at specific index, if that's the same as the number that we're looking for, then we can return that index because that's what we're looking to return. It's like where exactly it is in the array or the first time that you see it in an array. So if we don't see it, what do we want to do? Is this function going to work? Or any suggestions on anything else we need to do? Just going to quickly prototype this. Increment index. Very good. Anything else? Yeah. So we can return -1. I might just have to find -1 instead, just because it's not, the number of it doesn't really matter too much as long as it's less than 0, because you can't have an index less than 0. So I might go like not found or something, and that could be equal to -1. I will just have those in for the sake of looking nice. So we'll return not found, which is equal to -1. Cool, that looks good to me. So let's try that out in our main function. So we can probably, that's fine. We don't really need to print the array at the moment, so we can get rid of that. We don't really care about the sum at this point anymore, so we can just tab that out. And then we want to find index. Oops. Well, actually, it returns something, so we need to set something up first. So we can say like int found index equal to find index, which is just the name of the function. And then we pass in the array, which is values. We pass in the length, which is size, and then the number that we're looking for. And I'll just pass in the number 42 for fun. And then we can print out what we find. And a new one. What am I doing that? There we go. Found index. So if we run this, cool. So this is the number that we were looking for, 42, which obviously isn't in our array. But if we're looking for an easier number, like we're looking for number 6, hopefully that returns the number 6. Yeah, because our array up here, after we do that to it, this looks like, that's what our array looks like. So, whoop, that's a lie. It actually stops 0. There we go. So yeah, the first time that you see number 6 would be that it is at the 6th index. Does anyone have any questions about that function or what it does or anything to do with that? Nope. Cool. I might just do an if-else statement under this, because printing out, like if we are looking for the number 42 and it's not in there, returning an index of 1 technically is incorrect because you can't really have an index of -1. So we might have an if statement. We'll say if found index not found, then that's what I want to print out instead of the found index. So instead I want to put that there and just get rid of the %d. That's why I want to get rid of all of this. And say something like index not found. Something like that. Then we can have an else statement for if it actually is inside it, then we can just move that in. Run that again. Yeah, so number's not there, and then if it is something that's there, like 2, then it prints out the index. Pretty straightforward, nothing too exciting. Just, yeah, a few little things. Anyone have any questions about any of this? Or about just 1D arrays in general? Because I'll move on to 2D arrays. All right, moving on to 2D arrays. So we've done all of these, just like nothing too exciting, just some straightforward stuff. And then 2D arrays. So can anyone tell me what a 2D array is, or can describe what a 2D array is? Feel free to turn on your mic as well, if that's easier than typing. Yeah, so basically it's an array of arrays. Can they be different types? Do they have to be the same types? About lengths, like what's the go? Anything specific about them that you can tell me? Yeah, so they've all got to be the same type. So Minesweeper is the perfect example of that. So your game board, I think it was called, or your minefield, sorry. So the minefield was a 2D array, and it was an array of integer arrays. Yeah, so it's an array of arrays. So instead of your 1D array just holding like one number, your 1D array then held more arrays. Like, I don't know, you can visualize it however you want, but it's like instead of your array just having one thing, it's like that one thing actually turns into another list. So it's like, I don't know, lots of little lists inside, not lists, sorry, a lot of arrays inside your other array. I like that. Whereas like these would normally be numbers. I might just zoom in because I don't know if that's hard to see or not. Whereas like these like pairs of brackets would normally be like a 1 or something like that. That's like some arbitrary number. These are now arrays of some length, whatever you want to decide to set them to. Yeah, so they all need to be the same type. So what if we want to initialize? Oh, so sorry, I'm trying to zoom out. There we go. So what if we want to initialize a 2D array? Let's do that. Let's do that practically. Yeah, that's fine. I might just chuck it down the bottom and we'll just go like 2D array stuff. So initializing a 2D array. Initializing a 2D array. So let's say that I want to make an array that looks like this. I want it to have like, I'm just going to use X to denote a number because I'm not really fussed what the number is at the moment. But if I wanted it to have something like this, I want to do something like that, and I'll put those all in big brackets. How would I do that? So I know that it's an integer array, and I'm going to call it, I don't know, I'm going to call it box, or boxes, because why not? So what values are going in which spot? Or like what's going where? Can anyone tell me what these two numbers are going to be? And in which order they're going to go? Might be easier if you look at it like this. Yeah, so it's going to be 4 and then it's going to be 3. So the way that 2D arrays work is you do the rows first. So I might make them variables. I might go int row equals 4 and int col equals 3. And I'll put them here. So yeah, it's going to be 4, 3, because for a 2D array, you do the rows first, and then you do the columns. So that's just, so there are 4 rows we can see here. Just make it a little bit nicer to look at. So yeah, 4 of these, and then in each of these, there are 3 elements. So yeah, that's just initializing that. And do a similar thing to, we didn't do it there, but a similar thing to if you want to tell it what the values are, like if you do that and put stuff inside. You just got to remember that if you do that, I think you have to nest it. Oh, where are we? Here we are. You've just got to go like, and you know, stuff like that. But you've got to make sure that it's like inside each other. But if you're doing anything, really any time that you're doing it, if it's not like a 2x2 sort of thing, you're better off initializing it using a loop. So on the topic of initializing it using a loop, let's set everything to 0. Set every element in a 2D array to 0. Yeah. So any ideas on how to do that? I'm going to create some iterators first, but just feel free to type suggestions in, because I know I'm going to need at least one while loop, because I know for arrays I need at least one while loop to go through. So I'll do like int I equals 0. Trying to zoom out. Oh gosh. There we go. I'm just gonna I'm just gonna comment all of this out. Okay, just so otherwise I'm gonna get weird errors because I'll be initializing stuff again. Anyway, back to this. So I'll have int I and I'll have while I, which is just one of my iterators, or just an iterator that I have at the moment. So while that is less than number of rows, I'm going to do something, and then I'm going to increment. So what am I going to be doing in here? Or what else do I need to do? Yeah, loop again for the second array. So what we're going to do is, I'll put that there. Loop for second. I'll do like loop for columns. Might be a better way of putting it. Loop for columns. So I'm going to loop for the columns. I need to set up an iterator for the columns. So I'm going to say int. Actually, that's a lie. I'm going to put my int declaration out here just so that it looks neat. So I'm going to say int j equals 0. But I'm going to say that j equals 0 here again. And I'll explain why afterwards as well. Then I'll do a while loop because we're iterating through another array, because 2D array is just an array of arrays. So you got to make sure that you iterate through. So I'm going to say while j is less than, col is the number of columns we have, which is that. It's like I is rows and j is columns, just for the sake of this. And then going through that, got to make sure that you iterate. And then what we want to do is we want to set everything to 0. So how do I do that? I know that I need to call the array, but I don't know what goes in these indexes. What's going to go there? And then I'm going to set it to 0. So what's going to be put in here? And in which order? Yep, I and j. So same thing applies as when you're initializing it, is that you want to put the row first and the column first. And so I is the iterator we're using to keep track of the rows. So we're putting that there. And then j is the iterator we're using to keep track of the columns. So that's why j goes there. And same thing with the 2D array. You call the array and then you tell it which index you want to do. And because it's like a grid, you're going to be calling like, I don't know if it's like 0, 1, you're going to be calling 0 and then 1. You don't have to do, oh, maybe that does set it all to 0. That's a good point. I'm not really sure. I don't know. Usually I just go through and set everything anyway. Let's see if I wrote a, it's a good question. All right, I wrote a code to print 2D arrays. Let's see, I'll print it out. What do I call it? I just pre-wrote some functions because I didn't think we'd be able to get to them. But let's see. So we've pulled the boxes, and I should give it a length. Did I give it a length? I did. But I did it for a square one. I'm just going to make these the same, just so that this function does something. Let's go 4. Yeah, so it doesn't like that. Does it like that? Yeah, so for this compiler, or like this editor, it hasn't set everything to 0 normally, but I'm pretty sure on the CSE machines it does. But yeah, just setting it to nothing, it doesn't like. You're not really initializing it to anything, you're kind of just saying that it's going to have space. And then I'm pretty sure that will only set the first index. Yeah, doesn't really like that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure on the CSA machines, it does set everything to 0 initially. But for the sake of this, we're going to do it that it doesn't. We'll pretend that we just don't know what everything is. And then we can just go through and set it all to 0 just for fun. Cool. I'll change that back to 3 now. Yeah, that was a very good question. So we've set everything to 0, going through, looping through, done all of that. And then if we want to print out the array, we're going to do a similar thing. Similar thing to how we initialized it. So I'm just going to steal all these variables again. And remember to get rid of these because you don't want to declare it twice. This is the error that you'd be getting. If you're declaring something twice inside one function, you'll get an error. But like if you do like this works and like doesn't give you an error because it's its own function. Even though we've declared I here, it's not in the same function as this, so it doesn't really mind. Where are we? Here we are. Oh, I'll explain why I did this as well. So when you loop through, so you go through, you pick a row, and then you go from J to column -1, and then you iterate your J and you iterate your I, and then you get up to here. So you have to remember to reset J to be equal to 0. Otherwise, J is going to be stuck at 9, and it's never going to hit this while loop again. So you'd only be printing out the first row. So that's just something important to note, is to always reset it. Or you can reset it down here. It's really up to you. I usually just do it beforehand because then it's like set up the counter, set up the while loop, and then it's a similar thing here. It's set up the counter, set up the while loop. But yeah, either of these works, very much up to you. I might just comment it out so that you know that you can do it. I'm just not doing it. Pardon me. So printing out the array. So we have our rows, our columns, and instead of this, we're going to print it out. Let's go number. Oops. Go %d, and we'll have a space just so everything looks nice. And then we want to go boxes I and J. Is there anything else that I should add to my print statement, or anything else that I should add if I want to print it out so it kind of looks like this? Like just all the X's in the rows, like 3, 3, 3, 3. Is there anything that I should add to this? Or will this be all right? I might just run it and we can have a look. So that's what happens when I run this. So it's printed everything out in one line. What do I need to do, or where do I need to put stuff to make it look nicer? Because I want to have 3 rows of zeros. I want it to be like that 4 times, something like that. Yep. Where am I going to put my new line? Am I going to put it here? Or the plus. Exactly right. What that means is you're printing out everything in the row, and then once you're done with the row, before you move on to the next one, you want to make sure that you've like created a space to see where the next one is. And I'm just going to print a, no, that should be fine actually. Don't forget your semicolons. Cool. So that prints all of them out. Looks good. And maybe if you want to change what things get set to, like maybe you want that to be equal to I plus J, maybe. Still prints out, and like it looks fun. It's got diagonals, which is exciting. But yeah, so you can assign anything. Just remember you call the row first, and then you call the you call the row first, and then you call the column. Just all that is. Nothing too exciting. So let's turn this print function into an array. So let's call it void. Let's call it I'll change the name of it so it doesn't clash with another one. Call it, oh, I can't do that. Call it print2, which is a bad name, but I'm going to keep it like that. That's fine. So let's go like that. There we go. Everything has been fixed. Piece has been restored. So printing out a 2D array. So kind of things that we need to pass in, similar to a 1D array. So we need to pass in like what the array is going to be. So we can just stick with the name for ease. We'll call it boxes, and it's a 2D array, but we don't necessarily know what the size of it is. It's not fixed because it can change. You just don't know. So that means that you need to pass in the row size, or like number of rows. You need to, oh dear, not there. Here we go. You need to pass in the number of columns. And I feel like that's it. I'm going to say with confidence that that's it. Yeah. Because yeah, we have the array and we have the lengths. And then we can just move this print statement, or this printing stuff, from here into here. Just remember to reinitialize these when they go in. It's a new function, so they don't exist anywhere else. So make sure that you initialize those. I might put that comment up here. Initialize counters. Not counters, let's call it iterators. Yeah, because it's a void function, you don't have to return anything. I don't know why it doesn't like that. We can come back to it though. Like that, and then I want to print the duty array. Like this. So make sure everything's all aligned. And then we have the print 2D array. Oh, I don't like that I have a space there. Maybe it's that. I'm not sure. We'll work it out when it compiles. So we have our array called boxes. We have our row vector, not vector, our row number, I guess. Column number. Let's see if that works. Something's going to go wrong. Yep. Not sure why it doesn't like that. Because I gave it sizes. That might do it. Or something like that. Changes it. Really doesn't like that. Oh. Okay, that looks like this will work better. Okay, I take it back. We might not move that into a function. I'm not sure why it's not enjoying that. Oh, doesn't like the order. That's right. Okay, hopefully this works. Cool. There we go. So, yeah, my bad. I did have stuff pre-prepared. So yeah, telling it the length, and then just for this compiler, it wanted you to make sure that you put in the rows and the columns, which is fine, not really the end of the world. If you've got stuff hash defined like Minesweeper, then you don't really need to worry about passing these in. You can just have like what you had in the in your assignment where you just got like size and size, and then you don't have to pass in these because you already know what it is because it's been hash defined. But for this, just because we don't know what the size is going to be, we're just saying that whatever size gets passed in, that's what our array is going to be. Sorry for all that jumping around. Does that make sense? Or does anyone have any questions about that? All right, I'll take silence as a positive. I'll just quickly see what this does. Prints out a 2D array. Cool. So we can get rid of this because we've moved it into a function. And we've got this. Let's do that. I know it's a little bit vague, but I think that's okay. Cool. So that was printing that. Yeah, initializing a 2D array, printing a 2D array, and then let's create a function to count the number of zeros in any given 2D array. Or we can print like a specific number that we want to see. Like maybe we want to count the number of times we see the number 12 or something like that. So we can give it a number rather than it just being set at 0 because that's a little bit boring. So we can call it like int because we want to return the number of zeros. We want to return a sum. And if we want to return something, we want to set it to a type that, yeah, set it to a type that gets returned. So like if you start off a function with int, you're going to have an int return type. So let's call it like array number count. Cool. And then similar to before, you want to pass in the size. I'm just going to steal it straight from it actually. So you want to put in the rows, the columns, the actual array that you're giving it. And in this case, we want to do the number that we're searching for. And I'm just going to stick to what I did earlier and just call it searching, even though it's not an index this time. It's the number. Zeros in array. Cool. So because it's a sum, you want to set the sum to be 0 initially. And then we want to loop through this array. And this, just an easy way to loop through, I'm just going to steal it straight from there. Right through the 2D array, set up our iterators. We have a while loop for the columns, for the rows, resetting the columns, and then going through all the columns. But we don't want to do this printing. We want to have an if statement here. So we want to check the value, basically. So we want to know if the value that we find at this location, which would be array, not array, because that's a bad name. We have boxes. Instead, we have boxes I, A, which will return us one of the numbers. If that is equal to the number that we're searching for, what do we want to do? What's going to go here? Yep, 100%. So we found the number that we're looking for, or we found it, at least once. So our sum increases. And we want to make sure that we return down the bottom. And we want to return the sum. Cool. So we will prototype this, move it to the top. And then let's do it down here. Oh, I didn't want that. That's fine. Let's go int sum. And we have the row number, we have the column number, we have our boxes array, and then the number that we're searching for. Maybe I'll call it searching, and I will create a variable called searching. Maybe that might make it easier. Searching. So let's say that we're looking for the number like 2. Just like an easy one to start off with, and then we want to print out that sum. And a new line. Well, let's run this. Hopefully this works. That worked, but I'm not sure why it printed everything twice. Where did I leave? Can I leave a print statement or something? Ah, that would do it. Okay, there we go. That looks a lot better. So back up to where we are. So the number that we're looking for is number 2, and we're just getting that by calling the array number count. Got the row, the column, the array that we're looking for, or the array that we're looking through, sorry, and the number that we're looking for. And we can see here in the terminal, please let me know if it's too small as well. I completely forgot to zoom in. So the number 2 is just along this diagonal because I've just done an arbitrary I plus j. So it comes up 3 times, the sum is 3. If I did a number like 5, that should only come up once. Sum number 1. Yeah, not too tricky, really. As long as you know how to do this like double while loop, this should just be like burned into your brain, is that you have to set up 2 iterators or like 2 counters and 2 while loops. Like that's a bit of code that I would say definitely remember if you're struggling. Because yeah, you can just do, it's, yeah, the basis of doing anything with a 2D array. Oops, where are we? Down here. So yeah, counted the number of zeros in a given, or counted the number of a given number in a given 2D array. Cool. Does anyone have any questions about this? Anything that we've done? I will admit it's quite repetitive, but once you get it, you never forget it. If not, I might jump on to the next question. I'll do this. So I will zoom in a bit. So create a function that sums up each row in an array and stores the sum in the bottom row. So let's call it like int row sum. And we're taking it from a 2D array. So that means we need the row and the columns and the array. And for this, where is our, I might move this up just below our main function so that I can zoom back and forth. Go here. Cool. Set element of something. Cool. So for this one, we're sort of assuming, I might just make a note that we're making that assumption. We're assuming that the bottom row is empty. If we're summing up all of the values, might have worded this incorrectly. We'll go like the sum of each row. We'll say like the last column is empty. Let's say the last column. Last column is empty. So going to be following the basic structure of like I equals 0, just setting up our iterators and then looping through. Might give you just like a visual representation of what it is we're doing, because that might be a little bit confusing. So it's like we've got like so this is just like you have all the numbers are these x's, just like random numbers, doesn't really matter what they are. And then this, like these underscores, is where you want to store the sum. So they'll be set to 0 initially. Yeah, just for a little bit of visualization. So while I is less than the row, because I is the row iterator, and while iterate j. Cool. So if we want to create sums, we probably need a sum variable. And because it's going to be for different rows, I might put it. Oh, no, that's all right. I'll put it here. We'll go int sum. I'll call it row sum, actually, is a better name. Go row sum equals 0, as it should. And because the row sum is going to, it's going to change every row, so it's going to be reset, we want to make sure that we reset it to 0. So that can either be every time you start a new row, or it can be every time you finish a row. And I prefer to do it when I start because it makes more sense to me that way. But both work as long as you've reset it, pardon me, before you hit the next thing. So just reset that to 0. I might make a note of that. Reset the row sum to 0. Row sum for each row. All right. And then now we're where the second loop in, which is where we can call these individual values. And so we want to sum everything up except for the last thing. Technically, it doesn't matter if it's going to be a 0, but let's say that it does matter. You want to stop at that point. So does anyone have any ideas of what we would put in here, or do we change the while condition? While j is less than column -1. That is a good solution. So yeah, well, j is less than column -1. So that means that j is only going to go it's only going to go from here to here. It's only going to do 0 and it's going to do 1. So we go here, then we can call that spot, which would just be calling the array. Boxes. That's a lie. We want to add to the sum. That's what we're doing with row sum. A little bit ahead of myself. We're saying that the row sum, we want to add whatever's at these spots. Not the last one, just anything before the last one. So we're calling I and j. And that's just all the plus equal does is the same as row sum equals row sum plus boxes. It's just different notation, just for anyone branching out. It's also a little bit quicker, but completely up to you, whatever you want to do. So it does that, and then it iterates through, and then it's no, we're now past the point of what I want to be at. But when you exit this while loop, your j counter is going to be equal to col -1. So it's going to be equal to 1 less than the size, which just so happens to be the column index of this. So that means that we can easily store this row sum in the last column. So we can call that spot. We can just go boxes ij again, because we've iterated j. So that means that j is now 1 less than the column, because it can't be here anymore. So it has to be equal to the column -1 in order to not enter that while loop. So that puts it there. So now we're just saying that spot, that's where we want to store the sum, which we have called row sum. And then we do that for every row. It's also another reason why I reset the row right at the top, because I feel like it would be confusing, or it could be confusing, doesn't necessarily have to be, if you've got this assignment and then you reset it to 0. But once again, personal preference. So, and then we don't want to return anything. That's a complete lie. We want to make it a void function. So the reason that we want to make it a void function is, I probably should have mentioned this when we were doing 1D arrays. But when you pass an array into a function, you're not actually passing the whole array. If you've noticed in any of these other functions where we return something, we haven't actually changed anything in them. Yeah, okay, maybe not. But when we change stuff inside an array, we don't, here. Sorry, got a little bit lost. You don't have to pass the array back out. In all the other things, we've returned the sum and stuff like that, but you don't have to return the array, because when you're passing the array in, you're passing a pointer to the first index. And all that means is that you're directly looking at the memory. So you don't really have to worry about passing it back out because it's changing it like where it's being stored. Whereas like row and column, these, if you were to change these, you wouldn't be able to, you'd have to pass them back out in order for them to be the same value unless you pass them in as pointers. Because this function just makes a copy. It makes a copy of the row and it makes a copy of the column. Whereas it doesn't make a copy of the 2D array. It just goes straight to where that's being stored, which is why we don't have to pass it back out, which is why it's a void function. Yeah, hope that makes sense. I feel like I just did a roundabout way, but yeah, basically you don't have to worry about passing these functions out. Yeah, so let's see if this works. Let's make a prototype. And let's call it somewhere. So we don't really care about the sum anymore. Printing the array, that's probably wise. And yeah, we'll do it here. Let's go, what did I call it? Row sum. Pieces question. How would you find the largest number that's within the array? If we've got time, I can do that as an example next. We can make that a function. So we'll call row sum because it's a void function. We don't know, it doesn't need to be equal to anything, so we can just call it. And we'll pass in row, we'll pass in column, and we'll pass in boxes. Semicolon. And then we'll print the array again for fun, because I can't be bothered to initialize it to the values that I want. I'm just going to put another print statement in here just to up a little bit. Really just for looks, not really that important. Hopefully this runs. Cool. So looking at this, let's just like ignore this last column because that's not really relevant. But you've got 0 and 1, which equals 1. 1 and 2 should equal 3. What have we done wrong? Or what have I done wrong? I'm so unsure. In my mind, that should have worked. Row versus columns. Oops. Let's just put in a fun arbitrary print statement. See where we went wrong. Row sum. I didn't set my j to equal 0. Yep. Thank you for that. Yeah, after making this whole spiel about how you have to reset at the top. My bad. Basically, make sure that you reset it. And then, yeah, that should hopefully work now. Cool. There we go. All right. So make sure that you reset. Yeah, very easy to forget. So yeah, 0 and 1 is 1, 1, 2 is 3, 2, 3 is 5, 3, 4 is 7. Pretty, not too bad. Does anyone have any questions about that function or anything that we did in it? And yeah, arbitrary print statements are a good way of error checking because you can just move them around and work out where your error is. Yeah. Any questions about that function at all? It's not too bad. Really, like the main bit of this is making sure that you're only adding the rows before the last column, and then this assignment, which is just here, and remembering that you don't have to pass an array back out because when you pass it into an array, you're passing a pointer, and you're directly changing what's being stored there. Cool. All right, I'll just minimize these functions for the moment, because they're a little bit cluttered. How much time do we have? 12 minutes. All right, let's find the largest element in an array. That is our last thing, and then wrap up. So we'll do int, we'll call it largest. That just seems to make intuitive sense if you're looking for the largest thing. In a 2D array. So looking at an array, so we need to pass in the array that we're looking for, and let's go like that. So basically same thing, let's set up some loops, and I is 0, j 0, remember to reset j, and then while j is less than the columns, oops, iterate j. So we want to find the largest. We know that we want to return the largest. Let's start with that. We want to return the largest. So there are a number of ways that you can do it. So you can set like a variable. Let's do it like up the top. You can set the largest variable be equal to like anything, like the smallest number that you can think of. I can't remember what the hash defined for the smallest number is, but it's like something to, it's like 2 to the negative, I don't know, 2 to the negative 32? Maybe it's 2 to the negative 31 minus 1. I don't know. It's some like really small number, which is something that you can do because technically things can't be smaller than that. Anyway, doesn't really matter. It would have been in one of the first lectures, but the way that I like to do it is I like to get just one arbitrary value. But you want to make sure that the value that you get is from like your data source. So you want to make sure that the value that you get is from your array. And like what I mean by that is I'm going to set my largest to be the very first thing inside my array. So I'm going to call it, so I'm going to say boxes 0, 0. That's like the very first thing that I'm going to be checking when I loop through my array. So I'm kind of just like, I'm grabbing that and I'm like, this is the largest thing that I've seen so far. And it's like, cool. I don't know, it doesn't really do anything with it. It doesn't really matter. And then if you want to check, now that we're in the second while loop, we found like specific row, specific column, then we want to check, is this value strictly larger than the largest? So we can do that with an if statement. So if the value that we're looking at, so if boxes ij is greater than, so strictly larger than, whatever was our largest, largest. If it is bigger, then we want to reset what our biggest is, because it's no longer the biggest. So largest then equals boxes ij. And basically this will keep going through, go through all of the things. Anytime it finds something bigger, it will reset it and then gets to the end and returns the largest. So like you could set something like you could initially set largest to be like, I'll just put it in brackets here. You could go like in largest equals -1, something like that. If you think that's like going to be the smallest, but if you get given an array that's like all negative integers, like it's hard to know unless you know for sure that like everything's going to be a positive integer or like everything is a positive double or something like that. Unless you know for sure that there's an assumption that you can make, you're better off just picking a value that comes from your source so you know that you'll return something that's actually part of it. Like if I set my largest to -1 and then everything was less than -1 and -1 didn't actually exist in my array, you'd have an issue. Like your code would still work, but people looking at it would be like, I don't remember -1 being the largest in this data source or like in this array. So yeah, just grabbing, I'll make a note of that actually. Grab the first thing in the array. Grab the first thing. All right, same goes for 2D arrays. I just think it's a lot easier to just grab a number that you know for sure is going to be in there. Cool. I hope this works. I might actually change the name of it. Let's go largest num. That's going to be the easiest way to change it. Move that to the top. And then let's put it here. Let's go int largest. Largest number in the array. And yeah, if you're copying stuff directly from the prototypes that you make, remember to get rid of all the fluff that you don't need. All that you need to pass into a function is the variable names. You don't need to do these like definitions, and you don't need to tell it how big the size is, because when you initialize it, it already knows. So just like a note for when you're copying stuff, you only need to initialize what you're going to have it equal to, if you're going to have it equal to something or if it already exists. Like, yeah, you know the drill. Cool. So let's see if this works. Largest number. D and then a new line. Hopefully this works. Cool. So, oh yeah. So we did the whole changing thing where we did the row sum. So this was our initial array where the largest number would have been 5. And then we did the sum in these last columns, and this goes through everything. So it pulls number 7. We could change up how things get stored. It could be like I plus j. I don't know how to randomize this. I don't know. I plus j. I don't know, like modulus 7. Let's see what happens there. Still the same thing, which in hindsight makes sense. But like modulus plus 3. I think of a different way for it to go. I don't know. We're not here for maths, we're here for coding. But yeah, basically the last thing isn't always going to be the biggest element. Like maybe I just manually change it. Let's go here. Boxes. Let's go like 2, 2, 2, because why not? So like 2, 2 equals 12. Just for fun and to spice it up a little bit. I don't want it to be 2, 2. I want it to be 2, 1. Okay, that's changed it. So now that's the biggest number. Does that make sense, or does anyone have any questions about that? So all we're doing is setting an arbitrary biggest thing, and then going through the array, and like by arbitrary biggest thing, we're just getting the first thing so that it does actually exist, and we have something like feasible to compare everything else to. And then we set up our iterators, we loop through the rows, we loop through the columns, reset the column, make sure you do that. And then check if the value that we're currently on is bigger than what we previously had as the biggest thing. If it is, reset the biggest to be what we've just found. If not, doesn't really matter, keep iterating through, and then you return whatever it was. Yeah, any questions, or I don't know, general thoughts about arrays? How are you all feeling? Did you find this helpful, or anything that you want to change about it? So we've only got 2 minutes left, so I can't really start another example, but yeah, any feedback or any thoughts, or yeah, worries about the exam? No worries, you're very welcome. I might share this code with you as well. let's do that. So yeah, that's a link that should go. I think we might post it on a forum as well or something like that so that other people have access to it. I'll talk to Tom and see what the go is. But yeah, I'll stop sharing. It's a lie, I'll stop recording.